அனைவருக்கும் இனிய மாலை வணக்கம். தமிழ்நாடு அரசின் தொல்லியல் துறை பாதுகாக்கப்பட்ட வரலாற்று நினைவுச் சின்னங்களை பாதுகாத்தல், அகழாய்வுகள், கல்வெட்டியல், அருங்காட்சியகங்கள், கட்டிடக்கலை, சிற்பக்கலை, வரலாறு என பல்வேறு தலைப்பின் கீழ் நடத்தும் மாதாந்திர சொற்பொழிவு நிகழ்ச்சிக்கு வருகை தந்துள்ள அறிஞர்கள், பெருமக்கள், ஆய்வாளர்கள், அலுவலர்கள் மற்றும் மாணவர்கள் அனைவரையும் அன்புடன் வரவேற்கிறோம். கடந்த காலத்தின் எதிர்காலம், முன் வரலாற்றில் ஆய்வு, பாதுகாப்பு மற்றும் பொதுமக்கள் விழிப்புணர்வு என்னும் தலைப்பில் சிறப்பு சொற்பொழிவை வழங்க வருகை தந்துள்ள பேராசிரியர் சாந்தி பாபு அவர்களை மனமார்ந்த மகிழ்ச்சியுடன் வரவேற்கிறோம். நிகழ்ச்சியின் தொடக்கமாக தமிழ் தாய் வாழ்த்து.
நீராறும் கடலொடுத்த நிலமடந்த கெழிலொழுகும் சீராறும் வதனமென திகழ்பரத கண்டமிதில் தெக்கணமும் அது சிறந்த திராவிடனல் திருநாடும் தக்க சிறு பிறை நுதலும் தரித்தனரும் திலகமுமே அத்திலக வாசனை போல் அனைத்துலகும் இன்பமுற எத்திசையும் புகழ் மணக்க இருந்த பெரும் தமிழனங்கே தமிழனங்கே உன் சீரிலமை திறம்பியந்து செயல் மறந்து வாழ்த்துதுமே வாழ்த்துதுமே வாழ்த்துதுமே.
Hearty good evening to everyone present here. I extend my warm welcome to Professor Shanti Pappu ma'am, who is here to speak on the topic, The Future of the Past, Research Conservation and Public Outreach in Prehistory. Professor Shanti Pappu ma'am is the Secretary of the Sharma Center for Heritage Education, established in 1999, an institute committed to both research in archaeology and public outreach. She specializes in prehistoric archaeology, beginning with cultures, making the earliest Paleolithic occupation of India and extending up to periods marked by transitions to Neolithic agropastoral communities. Her interests lies in prehistory and quaternary studies, history of archaeology, ethnoarchaeology, and experimental archaeology and museology. For over 20 years, along with Dr. Kumar Akhilesh sir and her team, has been investigating aspects of early prehistoric occupation of South Asia through multidisciplinary efforts involving excavations at the sites of Athirampakkam and Centranpalayam and studies across parts of northern and southern Tamil Nadu. These projects include establishing and coordinating teams of scientists from India and abroad, facilitating collaborative networks to address questions related to India's prehistoric past through intertwined approaches in archaeology, geomorphology, paleoenvironments, geochronology, remote sensing, and ethnoarchaeology. Through in-house and outreach programs and traveling workshops, the team addresses school children and teachers, university students and faculty, and interested local communities on aspects of archaeology. She has published research papers in peer-reviewed journals, including Nature and Science, has authored a book, and is currently editing a 3-volume series on the prehistoric archaeology of Tamil Nadu. So, ma'am, now I kindly welcome you, ma'am, to the dais to deliver the lecture.
So, good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting me and my team here. I'm very grateful. I'm always happy to come whenever your department calls me or any of us. We are always say yes immediately and we are there. And thank you again. Tamil Nadu is leading the country in archaeology today, and I'm very proud and honored to be a part of this research adventure. Today I see in front of me a lot of students, and I tell you, till today I consider myself just a student. And why? Because I'm always curious and I'm always interested in things around me, whether it is a hand axe or whether it is pottery or beads or inscriptions. That sense of curiosity should never leave any of you. And this is what makes archaeology very, very interesting and very exciting. So today I'm going to talk only about prehistory, and I would like to have a lot of interaction and questions, either during, after, I don't mind, so that all of you can come out with your own ideas and we can discuss. So this, as always, archaeology is teamwork, and no one can work alone. And you have some of my team members, and we have also Yashaswini sitting there, and we have other colleagues all over the world, and it is our combined work that I wish to present. So it obviously begins with a simple stone tool. All of you know what this is. It's a hand axe. And it is this which stimulates so many questions about the past that we know still very, very little, and there's so much more research that requires to be done. And all these clues, whether about the lithics or the paleo-environmental data, fossil plants, animals, lying beneath our feet or all around us, and it is up to us to devise the correct questions and methods to investigate all this. So what I'm going to talk about is the past, the present, and the future, both in terms of the lower Paleolithic, which you all are aware of, to late Paleolithic, and then the beginnings of agro-pastoralism in this wonderful state. So what are the research questions we are looking at? These are many. You see on top over here, whether it's addressing questions through different theoretical or conceptual approaches, whether it is through application of diverse methodologies. All these things are something that we really need to consider very carefully. And at the same time, we cannot stop thinking about issues related to conservation and preservation of this culture, or reaching out to children, to school teachers, to anyone interested in the discipline. So, what are the key questions which we need to look at regarding landscapes, sites, stone tools, bones, other antiquities, the chronology and paleo environments? These are what I'm going to speak about. And what's equally important is how can we situate this research in Tamil Nadu in a global context, whether it is with our colleagues working in Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, or in Algeria, or anywhere else in the world. How does what we do here in Tamil Nadu, in a small trench, have meaning globally? This is what we should aim at, putting our research on the world map. What are we talking about? All of you know, many students we have taught are here in the audience. We are looking at the last almost 2 million years of the Quaternary, and we are looking at estimating dates, estimating the duration and timing of different processes, and changing hominin niches through time. All of you have been reading also in the newspaper, in scientific reports, on social media about the fantastic new developments in our record of human evolution. And you can see here from our simple story, now we have depictions which are getting more and more complex. So the story of who we are and how we came to be what we are like is now really, really getting to be very, very complex, to the extent that sometimes the correlation between stone tools and hominin species, especially in areas like India, becomes very difficult to understand as well. These cultural phases are all what you are accustomed to learning. But there comes a time when we need to sometimes question the nomenclatures that have come down to us from before. This is not to say that we throw out whatever we have till date, but we need to consider some of these terminologies, whether it's the lower, middle, or late Paleolithic, or what we used to call Mesolithic, or microblade technologies, or microlithic, or upper Paleolithic, and also look at what is the nature of the transitions, whether we see them in India at all and what they are like, and whether we have anything which is older than the Acheulean in the country. Obviously, the primary source of evidence, especially in Tamil Nadu and across most of India, are the stone tools. And like a famous archaeologist said earlier, we are literally squeezing blood from stones. And you can see here all these aspects can be understood from the study of lithics to get to the final questions that we want to answer about past behavior, which is what we are interested in. And we are also interested in looking at how tools were made, how they entered the archaeological record, and what happens to them both during the process of manufacture, use, discard, and afterwards, before we finally collect them. This is one story which we are all interested in understanding. So for those of you who are archaeologists, you can safely ignore this slide. But for others in the audience, these are the terms I'm going to use all the time, whether it's flake or core or tools or hammers. And the ultimate aim is deconstructing prehistoric technology and cognitive skills. We are also looking at all these behavioral changes in the context of what the environment was like. Today it's a really, really hot day. All of you might be happy to come here because the room is AC and you can perhaps have a nice nap, but don't do that right now. But the environment is absolutely crucial to understanding behavior, the interactions between hominins and nature around them, and the interfaces which are occurring. Adaptation perhaps to some very extreme environments or events, this is also something really very important for us to study. And ultimately also, how do sites form? What are the various natural and cultural processes which influence what we finally excavate? So this is also something that we need to pay a lot of attention to when we are excavating or surveying sites and regions. Firstly, let's talk about theory. Now, there are n number of research questions that we can ask. So what, for example, cultural sequences and chronology, where do we see behavioral changes and evolutionary trajectories? How is our work important in the global context? What was the environment like? How do we look at cognitive, aesthetic, non-functional, symbolic aspects of life? All these are research questions, as also those related to the ways in which we think about conservation, the ways in which we think about public outreach and science communication. So this is one of the very important areas that we should focus on a lot. That is, what are the research questions that we are trying to address? And all of you may have different ones. Equally important is the methodologies. Now, methodologies, as we know, have been adopted in Tamil Nadu in many different ways, right from 3D scanning, and you have the experts here in the audience, to use of LiDAR, to drones, to satellite image data. All these that you can see on the screen here are very important methodological approaches which we adopt to address and solve our research questions. What is the background for all this? The background is our long-standing work in both northern and parts of southern Tamil Nadu, when we are looking at initially Paleolithic and now sites of different time periods. And we see all these sites which are scattered. For example, I'm just zooming down to a region which you all know near Chennai, and all these red dots represent prehistoric sites. So with this, we see that sites occur in different geomorphological and ecological contexts. So you have these ferricretes, these ferruginous deposits, or your red terry sand dunes further down south, or you have these fluvial deposits at Athrampakam, each of which tells another story about what the environment was like to which these people had to adapt and live in. Through time, in this region, there have been many people working across Tamil Nadu, and they all had different conceptual and theoretical approaches and research questions. So beginning from Robert Brucefoot, who not only discovered the first artifact, hand axe, but did much more, through time, you have many scholars, whether it's V.T. Krishnaswamy, K.V. Soundarajan, the Archaeological Survey of India with K.D. Banerjee, and many others more recently. You have changing research questions and conceptual approaches which have influenced their research strategies. So it's very significant in today's date that we are talking about Bruce Foote because he discovered in this very month the stone tool at Pallavaram. And what is important about his work is that this discovery placed Tamil Nadu first and then obviously the whole subcontinent in a global context, because he could compare these tools with what he found, was being found at that time by other scholars in England and France, and it immediately drew attention globally to the fact that this region has such a great antiquity. But his importance was not only discovery. Discovering a site in India is pretty easy. Anyone can do that. But what he did was to put together all these things you see on the screen to make some interpretations about past behavior. How did people behave in the past? How did cultures change? What sort of classification can you bring in? All these things were what he did way back in the 19th century. And then, of course, there were many other scholars. This paper is published and it gives you an idea on the term Madrasian. All of you at some point may have read about the term Madrasian or the Madras hand axe traditions when you're reading textbooks. So how did that term come about? These terms were given by different scholars who sometimes didn't even work in India, like Oswald Mencken, but were adopted to explain some of the industries over here. And then this term became common all over the subcontinent. So it's very important sometimes to know why we are using certain words and what is the origin of those words. Now, let's look at some of the questions which we need to address for the oldest evidence of occupation here in Tamil Nadu. Now, you all know that we have all these various cultural phases which we have categorized, and you can see here in this line over here you have estimated dates. And we are very sure in Tamil Nadu that we definitely have an Acheulean in the lower Paleolithic with these beautiful hand axes, cleavers, and so many other tools. And then this continues steadily through time. The question is, do we have something even older than this? And across the world, so let's see whether there is any evidence of something really old in India and here as well. So if you look globally, you see that there's something called the Old One or a Mode 1, which is present not only in parts of Africa and parts of Europe and in parts of Asia. And in India also, sites in this particular part of northwest India as well as in Pakistan have been identified as being quite old, more than about 2 million or 1.9 to 2 million years old. So do we have anything like that elsewhere in India? That's not very sure. We are not very sure about that. Do we have that in Tamil Nadu? We don't know. But some of the recent sites that we are working on do have some sort of a core and flake assemblages which doesn't have these big hand axes. And we need to look for more such sites and perhaps try to understand what they mean and get them properly dated. So, various types of dating methods, including magnetostratigraphy, cosmogenic, CRN, luminescence, ESR, and other methods can be used to date some of the sites after excavating them properly and get an idea of the age of these cultures across the state. Then, let's look at the Acheulean. We know for sure that we have a very, very well-established Acheulean in Tamil Nadu. Across India, through time, practically everywhere except for some regions, you have these Acheulean sites which have been identified and very well studied and excavated. Unfortunately, only a few of these have got proper dates. So you can see here, the dated sites are these little red triangles and they're not that many. But there are indications that some of these sites are indeed very old. And dates from Athirampakam and others now, new dates which are coming up from other sites also show that this is a pattern that can be seen. And I'm pretty sure that lots more sites will prove to have that degree of antiquity. But it's also important to see how long this Acheulean lasts in India. And you have some sites which are really very young as well. So it shows, if we accept those dates, it shows that this particular culture or tradition continued for a very long time, with some changes obviously, but overall if you see them, you can pretty well identify what they represent. And in Tamil Nadu, the maximum amount of Acheulean sites are concentrated in the region where we are now sitting, in and around northern Tamil Nadu. But over the years, Professor Rajan, his students and others have reported some sites in the deep south. So it's very interesting to see whether these hand axes represent an aspect of the Acheulean extending further south, or whether they represent a middle Paleolithic or something later. Whatever it is, this is a problem that really needs further investigation. As I said earlier, these very old sites occur in different types of sedimentary contexts, each of which has its own story about the type of environment in which these hominins were adapting. So if you have Atharampakam here with these very thick fluvial deposits, or you have other sites with these iron-rich ferricretes, or other sites in other contexts, and when we look at the environmental data coming from these sites, we get a very good idea of the variability in the different small little microenvironments that they lived in and adapted to. Also, we have a very good idea about this particular technology, which is called the large flake Acheulean. So you see here in experimental work, Dr. Akhilesh is detaching a large flake. And this is found right from Africa, across parts of Israel, and down to India, of course. And here, many of these very large flakes were made by different techniques. Here is one which he is showing, but there are many others, including a Combeva flakes found again in Africa, parts of Israel and across India, from which many of the other tools were manufactured. So when we are trying to study the Acheulean at Atharampakam or elsewhere, this is one of the crucial aspects that we are interested in. Site contexts, as you see at Atharampakam, and many of you may have visited it, you have these tools which erode out on the surface. Now, please don't pick them up. There's a great temptation, I know, in picking up artifacts, but don't do that because the sites get disturbed. So anyway, over here, the site, as you can see, is heavily contoured. It's undulating. And artifacts erode out from different layers and accumulate on the surface. So the surface represents a mixture of different layers and different time periods. But if we go down and we excavate down, we see that the Acheulean horizons go back really deep. And almost up in this trench, almost up to almost 6.7 to 7 meters depth, you have layers and layers and layers of these Acheulean artifacts, which indicates that this is some very special place, a very persistent space in the landscape, which has been attracting hominins for so many generations, coming back to the same place, leaving behind their tools, moving in their seasonal round, and then returning to the site again. And you can see here that there are certain phases in time where there was more intensive occupation as compared to other phases. And there is some variability in the way in which they occupied the site across the site itself. So as we excavated different trenches in different places across the site, this type of spatial variability gives us an idea of how hominins organized themselves, not only on the big landscape scale, but also on the small scale of this particular site. And as you all know, dating the site was very difficult and took a long time. Finally, we published in Science. And the date going back to around 1.1 million to 1.7 with a mean estimated average of 1.5 million came through magnetostratigraphy and cosmogenic nuclear burial dating. And this showed that the age of the site in South India, in Tamil Nadu, parallels some of those occurring in parts of Africa and the Levant. So the Acheulean, which was thought at that time by some people to be very young, 600 or something like that, similar to Europe, now came down to be really very old. So what does that mean in terms of hominin migrations out of Africa to India? I don't like to put arrows on this map because the situation is now so dynamic that it's very difficult to say that that the migration was always unidirectional out of Africa, and now a lot of debate is going on about that. But for that, we need many more dates. We have some dates in India to prove the antiquity of this culture, but we need many more from other sites in Tamil Nadu and elsewhere. Also, now let's zoom down to their behavior. And we see that at Athirampakam, in the oldest levels, there is no good raw material to make their, very large flakes, which I showed you. So these hominins were actually traveling quite far, almost 5 kilometers, perhaps more, searching for good rocks to make stone tools on. And this can be slowly identified and narrowed down by studies using different types of instruments by which we can help to quantify or get an idea of the type of rocks used, even though we know that they are quartzites, what exactly to make that more precise and to understand their movement patterns in a better manner. So overall, we have somewhere in the landscape where these hominins are detaching these large flakes and manufacturing them first, then carrying them to the site, then using them, discarding them, retouching the waste products into other small tools, and then carrying away some tools and hammerstones. So altogether, we are able to build up quite a complex picture of their technology, which shows that there is no way that we can say that they were very, in inverted commas, primitive. They're not at all so. They have excellent idea of where the resources are. They are anticipating and planning their movement across the landscape, and studies of the technology clearly indicate how sophisticated the manner in which they made different types of tools, and this is coming out through very detailed analysis that we are constantly working at. So with traditional ways of looking at artifacts, 3D scanning of all these artifacts and analyzing them using special software, we can get a better understanding of variability of the morphology of the shapes and the nature of these tools, both across the site, through time, through layers, different parts of the site, and also between sites. When we can compare these tools with the other site we are excavating, with somewhere in Israel, with somewhere in Africa, and get a better idea of what is happening on a broader scale. For this, experimental archaeology becomes really important, and Dr. Akhilesh is here, and he's running this program in our center for many years, where the aim is not to make a beautiful hand axe. It's quite easy. All of you, I think, have done some of our workshops, and you have seen that you have indeed made very nice tools. But the point is to make a hand axe which actually is that similar to what was found at the site, and try to get into the minds of the makers and try to analyze this at a deeper level, and later move on to use-ware and microscopy and try to figure out what they were using it on. So this way, experimental archaeology is crucial. Now, you can't understand just one site in a landscape. To understand anything, you have to look at numerous sites. And you see here all these red dots, out of which we zoom down to another site, which I'll just call SEN for now. Why that site when there are so many all around? Again, we come back to site formation issues. So we try to look at sites which will give us the maximum information and which are not disturbed by some other processes operating in the past or present. So in this site, the question is looking at regional variability. And here, we get a very different type of sediment, very different type of context for the Acheulean, which indicates another environment they were occupying. But we do get similar technologies represented here with the complete manufacturing sequence noted, unlike Athirampakam, where we get only the last stages. And under that, you have this core and flake industry where we get a lot of pieces which can conjoin, indicating a site that is very, very well preserved and not much disturbed at all. So this is what we are currently working on. Pariculam, this book has been brought out in collaboration with your own department. It's a marvelous site excavated by your department, and we scanned the hand axes and cleavers from this particular site. It's published, and perhaps at some point in time the site can be dated and add another bit of information about the Acheulean of this region. Then what happens next? Can we identify very well cultural changes going on and think about questions as to why these changes are occurring and as to how we identify them? For example, the Middle Paleolithic everybody talks about, but can we really pinpoint its origin, its evolution, and its ending in Tamil Nadu? This is not that clear to us as yet. So in Athirampakam, we were very carefully excavated all these horizons, and what we see is something really complex. In the early phases that we dated with luminescence dating with my colleagues, Professor Singhvi and others from PRL, you see these very large hand axes, very, very few, and they become much smaller. Plus the large flakes which you saw in the Acheulean start disappearing completely, and new technologies such as Levallois appear slowly. Is it very fast? No. You can see through time how this technology changes, and because there's no chert or siliceous rocks available in this region, they used very fine-grained quartzites. That's very different from the quartzites used in the older levels. And then at some point, the site is just abandoned. We find very few tools there, hardly anything, and the studies by my colleagues on phytoliths and paleo environments are showing a period of a lot of great aridity. So maybe that's one reason, that's a question that we are still looking at, and it's very, very interesting. So when we are talking about a Middle Paleolithic, it's not just the presence of small flakes and scrapers and Levallois. These continue through time. The hand axes also continue and diminish in number and in morphology and in their size. So we need to look at the assemblage, technology and structure as a whole before we jump to cultural classifications. These patterns of change are not only in Tamil Nadu. Now new data is finding them in Andhra and globally. So again, we are able now to put our Tamil Nadu data into a bigger pan-Indian and global context. Sixth point, towards innovation and towards the technology produced by modern humans. What does that look like? We have many terms which we use. Upper Paleolithic, some people prefer late Paleolithic, some people call it microblade technology, some people call it microliths. And now we know very well that microliths are also very old and not only found in the Holocene. So just if we find a microlithic site, it need not be Mesolithic, again in inverted commas. So we have very old sites in parts of central India, very old sites in Sri Lanka with microliths, and now wonderful dates are coming out which Dr. Rajan and colleagues published in their book, showing perhaps in Tamil Nadu also, some very old dates are indeed coming out from these sites. I think the work of Dr. Selvakumar, Dr. Rajan and all are putting this in perspective. So, what is this late Paleolithic like? We see a diversity of technologies, both in northern Tamil Nadu from our own work, and we have a project now in southeastern Tamil Nadu near Thoothukudi and other districts in the extreme south, in which we are seeing a diversity of blade technologies, other tools, other small microliths on flakes, other artifacts as well, which indicate many different lithic reduction sequence which are being used. And we have a program of experimental napping which Dr. Akhilesh is working on now, in which we are trying to look at the archaeological assemblages and figure out the precise way in which different types of blades were detached at all these different sites that you see across the state. So right from north to south, there is this variability. For example, now we have been working on these theories, sand dunes, and you're all familiar with them, and they're associated with these microlithic industries. So there are many important questions regarding the Teri sites in the similar sites to the Teri sand deposits that you see in Sri Lanka, called the Iranamadu Formation, which you see here. This is Sri Lanka, this is India, this is Sri Lanka, this is India. So there are many similarities in the environmental factors that led to the deposition of these sediments, and with the technologies as well, which are closely linked not only to sea level changes, to other factors, and associated with the big question of population migrations. So this is something that we are currently working on, and we hope that by the end of this year, next year, we'll have more data to present and to resolve some of these questions for Tamil Nadu. Coming to the end, towards agro-pastoralism. Now, we have recently brought out this book in collaboration with your department, with the Tamil Nadu State Department, which looked at some of these areas in northwest Tamil Nadu where you have evidence of the manufacture of these polished stone cells or stone axes, whatever you call them. And it's really interesting because you have entire sites which have extensive evidence of manufacture of these tools, but very few tools are actually found at the site of manufacture itself, being carried elsewhere. But this leads us to a much bigger question. Same with the Middle Paleolithic. Here too, when we find a polished stone celt, we need to acknowledge that it may not be simply what we call a Neolithic. How do you define the Neolithic? Most people nowadays are looking at it in terms of a package of behavioral changes associated with agro-pastoral ways of life. What was that like in Tamil Nadu? How far back can we take it? What is the association with iron? How does landscape usage change? And what does it mean in terms of migration of populations with domesticated plants and animals? Some excellent work is now going on in parts of Tamil Nadu which will help solve this point, and many dates are also coming up which are pushing back this potential transition or change or adoption of these ways of life at different sites. But this is something very interesting, and I think a lot more work is required on this time period in this region, especially in terms of the analysis of the type of crops and animals that were domesticated and what it means in terms of behavioral changes. Environments. This is again crucial. We have actually, for the early to middle Pleistocene and late Pleistocene, not much data for Tamil Nadu in relation to archaeological sites. A lot of people have worked on climate change in the Holocene, geologists, environmental people studying paleo-environments, but in terms of looking at the environment at specific sites. This is an example from Athirampakam, where we used geochemistry. Now isotope studies are going on, phytoliths and diatom studies are ongoing, and we are getting some exciting new data now, which indicates periods of extreme rainfall, again aridity, again changing vegetation through time. And not only at the site, but around it as well. Whereas a few kilometers away, the site of Senna and Palyam of the same Acheulean culture is giving a different picture of the local vegetation. So these are all very exciting, and with this micro data collected from individual sites, at some point in time later we'll be able to put together a much better picture of the entire region. Lastly, towards conservation. Now this is a problem which really bothers all archaeologists, and what we tried to do was use satellite data to quantify what is happening at different sites. So if you have blue, say, some dam or some lake, or if you have green is some forested area, or you have a modern quarry, or you have industrial areas, or you have villages expanding, all these need to be quantified. So we could put that down, and we could suggest when we went to the field for each site we studied, what is the best possible solution. So some sites like Athrampakam, Senranpalayam, we strongly recommend that no development work should occur at the site or nearby, because these are very important sites. Some sites you cannot save everything. So some sites we suggest, okay, do a rapid salvage operation and then you can carry on with building your factory or whatever it may be. So the remedial plan for conservation of prehistoric sites is very different. To open them to tourism would be really very dangerous, because footfall of human people, all of us walking over the site can damage the very fragile sediments very badly. So unlike other bigger sites, for prehistoric sites which have very, very fragile sediments and stone tools and bones or whatever may be, maybe they should be replicated like you have done in the museums. And that would be really good. Plus, these two bottom images is something we did a long time back, but which still works today, is predictive modeling. So you can build a model of where you will expect sites of a particular type to be, whether it's Acheulean or Neolithic or whatever it may be, and then you can test that model in the field. So when we did that, we could actually find sites very fast before development can come and infrastructure can be built on, lead to the destruction of the site. This is something very useful. Public outreach. Now, I think Tamil Nadu has excelled in the marvelous museums which you have built. So the first way of reaching out is academic publications. And this, if you have in books or in peer-reviewed journals which have a good impact factor, it can really change the way people outside the state and outside the country can look at your work and judge it impartially. So it's very good if you get a very bad peer review, if you get reviewed brutally, which has happened to all of us, which has helped us improve. So this is academic outreach. And outreach also in the form of our methods of teaching. So if you see all the papers on the screen, these are publications on teaching pedagogical methods. How do you teach napping? How do novices like all of you came and did the workshop? How did you acquire your skills? So this is also one way of outreach. Pedagogy for adults. How do adults learn as compared to how do children learn? So what are the best ways we can teach adults, or what are the best ways we can teach children? Through immersive learning, not merely textbooks, but actually experiencing the subject in multiple different ways. Here you know this better than I do. It's magnificent effort. And these efforts like this have transformed the way people in the state or across India are perceiving archaeology. Earlier, when we were traveling by train somewhere and we said we are doing archaeology, people said, oh, architecture. But now, with this public outreach in the form of this type of museum, which reaches mass audiences, numbers of people, the whole perception of the subject has changed. And this is really very important, especially when it comes to prehistory, because that's not a subject many people really are aware of. So what we have tried to do right from 1999, we have tried to do this public outreach at the site while we are excavating itself. So you have exhibitions, you have everyday people coming, you have art competitions, you have all sorts of things. Or here, this is Mr. Tulsi Raman standing here at Athrampakam, where you have children coming and looking at the excavation and learning. Plus, I will not play the volume here, plus the need for heritage interactivity to go beyond books. And many of you may have done this in our campus, where through actually excavating, or as you see here, learning how to make stone tools, or learning pottery, or learning different aspects of the past, you can get a better understanding that no textbook can teach you. So whether it's on geology, or on rock art, or on early civilizations, or whatever the case may be, this is something that we strongly believe in. To connect scientists, whatever scientist you may be, archaeology is a subject in which everyone is welcome. So whenever anyone tries to visit us, we try to get them to talk to children or interact with them in many different ways. Or merging the museum experience in the classroom. So to restructure the teaching environment so you can actually get an experience of the subject while you're learning. And it's a very, very dynamic, very atmosphere where you can actually have the hominin skulls around you or have the stone tools around you when you are actually learning. Plus, to carry this experience across not only India, but we have gone to South Korea and we have done in collaboration with Algeria to take it in the form of a traveling module across the world, so that the prehistory of Tamil Nadu especially is known to some children sitting here in Korea, or it is connected with colleagues working in Algeria. So they get a feel of this experience on a global level. And of course, books. The website, children's books. This is one of the latest books which we have brought out, but there are others as well, and there's a lot of information available on the website. So it is through all these efforts that we move from research to thinking about conservation. Personally, I cannot go out and conserve a site, but I can suggest ways which are the best ways to do so. And I can work with the team in a different approach to think about issues of conserving, say, prehistoric or protohistoric sites or other sites, and of course to reach out. Lastly, as I said, none of this is possible without all these people. Whether they are scientists from so many different disciplines, whether they are the people who we work with in the field, the villagers, the people from the local towns, the district authorities, all of them are responsible for what I have said. So I might be speaking, but behind me there are so many people, so many names who have contributed their knowledge for this particular project in this state. And of course, I'm very grateful to the Department of Archaeology, State Government of Tamil Nadu, ASI and others for giving us permits, and to various funding agencies who have made this possible. And to all of you for listening so patiently. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
கேள்வி எதுவும் இருந்தா கேட்கலாம் மேம்கிட்ட. இன்றைய சிறப்பான சொற்பொழிவை வழங்கிய பேராசிரியர் சாந்தி பாபு அவர்களுக்கு எங்கள் இதயம் கனிந்த நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறோம். அவர்களின் உரை முன் வரலாறு ஆய்வு மற்றும் மரபின் பாதுகாப்பின் அவசியத்தை அனைவருக்கும் தெளிவாக எடுத்துரைத்துள்ளது. சிறப்பு விருந்தினரை சிறப்பிக்க வருமாறு திரு கிருஷ்ணமூர்த்தி ஐயாவை அவர்களை பணிவுடன் அழைக்கின்றோம். மேலும் இந்நிகழ்ச்சியில் கலந்து கொண்ட அறிஞர் பெருமக்கள், ஆய்வாளர்கள், ஆர்வலர்கள், மாணவர்கள் மற்றும் இருதுறை அலுவலர்கள் அனைவருக்கும் மனமார்ந்த நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறோம். அடுத்ததாக நாட்டுப்பண்.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जल सिसरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे जब जय गादा जनगण मंगल नायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे